We're expecting a big speech from possibly the future Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, today in the City. This is the one that everyone sits up and listens to. If she can win over the financial sector, that will be something. What are we expecting to hear from her today?
Well, good morning. Rachel will be giving her May's lecture this evening, as you've said. The May's lecture is a pretty totemic lecture for any shadow chancellor or chancellor, and Rachel will be setting out how we are on the cusp of an opportunity in this country, an opportunity for a decade of national renewal, where we can get growth back into our economy, make people better off, and start to turn the page on 14 years of failure from the Conservatives.
In terms of making people feel that you are getting things back on track and that the mood is changing.
That's right, but also being honest about the fact that the state that the country in is not great. Rachel Reeves has already said that if Labour is to win the election later this year, it'll be the worst fiscal inheritance that any party's had since the Second World War. And that's why we talk about a decade of national renewal. There'll be some things we can do immediately, and public services are obviously one of our priorities. But in the long run, we need to get growth back into the economy so that people do feel better off and businesses are paying more tax off the back of profits, so that we have more money coming into the Treasury for tax cuts and for public service investment in a sustainable way. But she will highlight the fact that after 14 years of the country bumbling along the bottom, now in recession, we've really got to focus on what the government can do to get it back on track. And for us, that's around stability, investment and reform, political and economic stability, which we've not had for a long time, a decade of investment, private and public, and the government really taking seriously the reforms that are necessary to deliver for our country.
Darren, if you haven't got money in the Treasury, if the cupboard is bare, how are you going to do that?
Well, a lot of economic growth comes from the private sector. It doesn't come from spending people's taxes. And so you want businesses to be having the confidence to invest, whether that's in building things or growing their economy and employing more people. And when those businesses are more productive, offering those pay rises to their workers so that they can feel better off too. But we hear all the time from investors and businesses that even though they've got money to invest, they're not investing in the UK right now for a whole host of reasons. Many of those reasons are things that a government can fix by working in partnership with the private sector. And that's why we've set out our plans for doing just that.
I'm interested in some of the rhetoric that Rachel Reeves is using. I mean, we talk on this channel a lot about the red wall, but I wonder if the blue wall is pretty pivotal to you guys. I mean, to see Rachel Reeves' speech that hasn't even happened right on the front of the right-wing Daily Telegraph this morning, talking about us being on the cusp of a 1979 moment and saying that her change will be as radical as Thatcher. She's talked about Thatcher as being a heroine of hers. I mean, is this a ploy to try and woo Conservative voters?
Well, look, the Labour Party is now a party under Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves fit for government, and that means being a party for the whole country. I know we talk a lot about red wall, blue wall. I think the Liberal Democrats say there's a yellow wall as well. There's probably some others. But actually, we're appealing to voters across the whole country, and that means being on the newspapers, being on the TV channels, being wherever people are and having the conversation with them about our plans for the country and showing that the Labour Party has changed under Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' leadership and that we're ready to transform the country on their behalf.
People are going to have to see something, they're going to have to feel something, Darren, something that makes things different, the whole aesthetics of the country. Potholes in the roads is a very good example of this, at an 8-year high today, as if it couldn't get any worse, but the figures say that it hasn't been worse in the past 8 years. Seriously, is something like that going to change? I would argue with you it would make a big difference in terms of how people feel things are changing. What would you do about potholes?
Well, potholes, a really important issue that comes up all the time. As a constituency MP, I hear it all the time from constituents, and as someone that drives around my constituency, I cuss just as much as everybody else when you slam your tyres into these things. There's a Treasury issue here, which is that at the moment, the government does an annual settlement as opposed to a 3-year settlement, which is what governments normally do. That's because of the instability we've had in our country. The problem with that is you've got an annual pothole fund, which is one pot of money that has to be spent in that year. So councils will get the guys along with with tarmac just to fill it in, and as we know, that all comes up again pretty quickly. What you really need is a longer-term settlement that allows councils to have the funding to do proper maintenance of our roads. And if you can do proper ongoing maintenance, the risk of potholes goes down, and over time you'll be able to fix that. And that's why we're providing political stability, talking about investment and reform, so we'll be able to solve issues such as that.
Yeah, Darren, talk about cursing. You must have been cursing the moment that Jeremy Hunt announced the non-dom scrapping, stealing your pledge, leaving a huge black hole in your finances and no way to pay for all these pledges that you've been making. Were you cursing under your breath, and how are you going to pay for everything now?
I should probably just clarify, I'm a bit too polite to be cursing too frequently, but look, we were not cursing when the Tories took the non-dom status from us. We found it quite amusing, to be honest, because we'd been arguing for that for years as an effective way to raise taxes that were so important for our public services. And until about the week before the budget, Jeremy Hunt and the Conservatives were saying that that plan was not effective, that it wouldn't raise any money, that it would cost the country money. And now in the budget, they've taken our policy and they've said it's going to raise over £3 billion a year. We agree with that assessment. We think that they should have done it years ago. Well, we will set out in our manifesto all of our policies being fully funded and fully costed. There are still measures that we've announced this side of the manifesto, for example, on closing the VAT loophole on private schools and dealing with private equity taxation for people that buy and sell businesses that raise an immediate injection of cash for our public services. But again, this is why you've got to get back to growth. If our country had been growing on average at the same rate as other wealthy countries, we'd have £50 billion more each year to pay for public services, but we don't, because the Tories have failed to get the economy growing, and that's why we're in recession right now. Okay.